Episode 1 Alone. Act 1 Solo Dolo. Connor Campbell sits on a bench in Central Park, watching the people go by. He smiles to himself, realizing how different his life is now as he reflects on the last 10 years of his life. It's had its moments, days where he's felt bleak, times where he did things that he didn't want to do. However, after meeting Lance Davidson and becoming the Northeast Soldier, he's on life. Suddenly, the tranquility is ripped away when Connor notices something happening a few yards away from him. A man dressed in a black hoodie slowly pulls out a knife from his pocket and approaches what looks to be a teenager. He sits forward and watches closely and attempts to listen. Hey kid, let me hold 50, the mugger says as he pulls a knife from his pocket. The silver blade scares the kid and Connor decides to intervene. He walks up quietly behind the mugger before suddenly grabbing the mugger and shoving him to the ground before kicking the knife away from the mugger as the kid runs off. Down on your stomach, hands clasped behind your head, Connor says with a serious tone. People begin to record while some continue to pass. I know you. You're the one who killed that Diamondback guy. Did what Luke Cage couldn't, the mugger says. Connor ignores this and calls in the attempted mugging. He pulls his phone out of his pocket as he calls one of his fellow officers. On the first ring, he gets an answer. Officer Bagley, the officer on the other line says into the phone. Hey Mark, got a criminal waiting for you in Central Park attempting a mugging. I intervened, Connor says. Alright, be there soon, the officer says as he hangs up. Connor waits for a few minutes and sees the officer arrive. That's your ride, pal, Connor says sarcastically to the mugger, escorting him to Bagley's patrol car. Connor sits the mugger in the back before closing the door. Nice catch, Campbell, Bagley says. Connor thanks him and starts to say something else before feeling his phone vibrate and looking at the caller ID. Chief Audrey, Connor says to himself in a low tone. He looks up at Officer Bagley and answers the call, hearing the stern voice of the new chief on the other end. Connor, suit up. We need your help right now, Audrey says as she walks amongst the multiple heavy crates at a warehouse. Police officers stand by, some simply observing the crates, others waiting for something to happen. Got a report of a break-in at the Old Stark Industries warehouse, her voice says with a stern tone. In the time since Glenn Jackson died, Audrey has become well acclimated to being the chief. She made the transition into the role look easy, but Connor could tell how much it was crushing her. Alright, I'll be there in 15, Connor says. Minutes later at the station, Connor is greeted by the officer at the reception desk. Officer Campbell, how are you? He asks. Connor maintains a serious demeanor and informs the officer why he's there. I've got to get my armor on. Audrey called me to a Stark Industries warehouse. There was a break-in, Connor tells him. Without missing a beat, the officer nods in understanding. Head on in, Northeast Soldier, he says. Okay. Connor nods sternly and he briskly walks through the main precinct as he rolls up the sleeves on his black sweater. Dozens of officers are in the station, and Connor gives them nothing more than a nod or a wave as he continues to walk to the armory room. Connor arrives at the doorway and enters in. The wall is lined with SWAT, riot, and raid gear, and at the end of the room stands the armor of the Northeast Soldier. Act 2, A Soldier's End. The Northeast Soldier flies past the buildings, the jets of the suit roaring with power as the civilians watch the sky while he zooms past. Connor thinks about his team. Generally, he isn't flying alone, but with the rest of Force 25 in Japan tracking the lead on a mysterious metal, Connor has been left behind to defend the Northeast. However, there's no problem with that. This is Themby Wallace with WJBP-TV, here at the site of a break-in at a Stark Industries warehouse, and it seems that, the news reporter says before being cut off as just then, the Northeast Soldier flies in above her, and the camera crew that are recording her report. That's the Northeast Soldier, are you getting this? Themby asks the cameraman. You better believe it, the cameraman replies as Connor blends behind the wall. Hey, thanks for coming so quick, Chief Audrey says to the Northeast Soldier. Connor simply nods and asks, what's the situation? Audrey signals for Connor to follow her, and the two walk the grounds of the warehouse. Audrey signals for Connor to follow her, and the two walk the grounds of the warehouse. Alarm was tripped at around 7 this morning, she says. Who was it? The Hand? Tombstone's gang? Connor asks, his voice puzzled. No, neither. After what the Defenders did some years back, the Hand is more or less inactive nowadays, and this is way too ambitious for Tombstone. This was the DODC, Audrey says, with reluctance in her voice. Connor sighs deeply and rolls his eyes while moving his head to look at the warehouse. Metal crates lie everywhere, some being resecured by other officers. Why would the DODC criminalize themselves? They have a free thievery card. They do whatever they want, and their excuse is that they're the DODC. Connor says as he remembers hearing about their transgressions. Audrey moves closer to Connor and drops her voice in a low tone before saying, "They want Stark Tech, but they won't say why. It can't be as simple as they just want to keep it safe. If so, they'd say that." Audrey says as she and Connor continue to walk and talk. "Lance told me they raided the main Stark warehouse a couple years back. The hell do they want now, a clean sweep?" Connor asks. Just then, the gate opens, and in walks two men, one named P. Cleary and another named Foster. Behind them are multiple other agents. "Oh, great, the dynamic duo," Audrey says with an exasperated voice. However, she quickly sizes up to the situation and signals Connor to follow her. The Northeast Soldier and Chief Audrey meet the two DODC agents as several police officers stand behind them to match the appearance of the DODC. "The situation is stabilized. You have no reason to be here," Audrey sternly says to the men. "Oh, you see, I think we do. This warehouse is a loose end," Cleary says to Audrey as he signals the agents to move forward. The cops behind Audrey and Connor move up themselves, almost forming a wall to keep the DODC from proceeding. "With all due respect, I recommend you withdraw from this area immediately. The Stark Tech has not been used in years and is not yours to take," Connor says, glaring through the visor of the Northeast Soldier armor. Foster chuckles at this and says, "Kid thinks he's the war machine." Suddenly, Connor sees the visor of his helmet glitch out, and the armor shuts off. "What the?" Connor says as his eyes dart back to Agent Foster's hand, seeing a hacking device that had just been used to disable the armor. "Hey, back off!" Audrey yells as she places her hand on the handle of her gun. The officers behind Connor follow suit, however the agents do the same as Foster moves closer to Connor. "Audrey, I can't move," Connor says. Foster leans in and tells him, "Now, we're going to remove this armor from you in lieu of the Stark Tech.